Welcome and thank you for participating in the public workshop for demonstration of the draft electronic interactive mapping tool, referred to as the mapping tool during this workshop for the draft NPDES permit for suction dredge mining discharges. I'm Afruz Farsi Madan, the program manager for statewide NPDES permitting, and I will be your facilitator for today. We want to extend a warm welcome and thank each of you for finding a way to join us virtually. As we start this public workshop, I'd like to introduce our program staff. We have Diana Messina, the Surface Water Permitting Section Chief. Diana will be monitoring the Zoom chat box for questions and comments during the workshop and will call on staff to answer. We also have Ryan Mallory Jones, our legal counsel, Renan Haregi, the lead permit writer, and Dory Bellen, the developer of the mapping tool. Walter Mobley is the staff demonstrating the mapping tool today and answering questions regarding the tool. Behind the scenes, we have Gorgagan Chan, Steve Chung, Ella Gulovi, Paul Levy, and our Cal EPA webcasting staff working hard to make sure this workshop is running smoothly. We are hosting this meeting virtually from Sacramento. We welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're meeting during a challenging time and appreciate your participation while many people are concurrently dealing with continued impacts of this global pandemic on our communities. The mission of the Waterboards is to preserve, enhance, and restore California's water resources for the benefit of present and future generations. We acknowledge the groups who have and who continue to experience economic, environmental, and social disadvantages, and whose daily lives are impacted by racism and injustices. The work our board conducts is to strengthen the empowerment of community voices, including our indigenous communities, as we work together to provide clean, safe, and affordable water to all Californians. Before Walter starts demonstrating the draft mapping tool, I will provide a quick background on this permitting process. The State Water Board released the draft statewide NPDES permit for suction dredge mining discharges last May, and held a public hearing on August 5th. During the board hearing, commenters requested higher resolution maps corresponding with the draft permit requirements. The State Water Board suspended the previously established public comments due date indefinitely and directed staff to develop higher resolution maps. Last fall, staff developed a draft interactive mapping tool for guidance purposes to assist interested parties locate areas that the proposed permit allows suction dredge mining. On December 30th, the State Water Board issued an updated public notice announcing the availability of the draft mapping tool to the public and the two public workshops to demonstrate the mapping tool. The public notice also announced the public comment due date of March 8th and provided the instructions on how to submit written comments. The purpose of today's workshop is to demonstrate to interested parties the draft suction dredge mining mapping tool and provide an opportunity for you to ask staff questions regarding how to use the mapping tool. We encourage you to provide your feedback on how we can improve this tool. Since this is our second workshop, we will share with you some of the major input we heard during our first workshop. You can find the link to the mapping tool and the user guide on the Suction Dredge Mining Program webpage. The focus of today's workshop is the draft mapping tool. We will try our best to answer your questions on how to use the tool, and we will listen to your comments on how to improve the draft tool. This workshop is not for commenting on the draft suction dredge mining permit requirements. However, if you need clarification on the draft permit to understand features on this map, please ask us during this workshop. If you would like your comments and concerns on the draft permit or the draft mapping tool to be included in the administrative proceedings, you have the opportunity to submit written comments until noon on March 8th of this year. Written comments provided within the time frame of the public comment period and any oral comments shared during the August 2020 board hearing will be considered. Here are some guidelines and logistics for today's workshop. The workshop is being recorded and webcast. Our discussion today is for informational purposes only. No written responses to comments will be provided and no formal action will be taken. We will try our best to respond to all of your questions. This PowerPoint presentation and the recording of the workshop will be posted on the Suction Dredge Mining Program webpage. If you would like to stay updated and involved in this process, please sign up for the Suction Dredge Mining Lyris email subscription to receive updates. There are two options for joining this workshop. Option 1 is the Cali PA webcast, which is for viewing and listening only. Option 2 is the Zoom meeting, which is interactive and you can ask questions and provide feedback. If you're not planning to ask questions or provide feedback, we recommend that you view the webcast at video.calipa.ca.gov. For those of you who registered in advance for the Zoom meeting, we will admit you to the meeting, but you will be on mute until it is your turn to speak. This slide provides instructions on how to submit your questions and comments. Please utilize the Zoom chat feature to submit questions or feedback. When you submit your question or feedback, please indicate whether you'd like to ask your question or provide feedback yourself, or if you would like staff to read your question. We will unmute you when it is your turn to speak if you chose to ask your question yourself. Once you have asked your question and received your answer, you will be muted. If you're having any technical issues, please send an email to Suction Dredge Mining NPDES at waterboards.ca.gov with the subject line technical issues, and we can help troubleshoot. I will repeat these instructions later on before we start our questions and comments session. This is the agenda for today's workshop. In the next slide, I will provide a quick update on the continuation of the public permitting process. After that, Walter will demonstrate the mapping tool. We will take a quick break after the demonstration and continue with the question and comment session. We will end the workshop with the next steps for this permitting process. On August 5th of last year, the State Water Board held a public hearing to receive oral comments for this draft permit. March 8th is the end of the public comment period. After the public comment period closes, staff will review all comments received and provide written responses. We will consider all oral comments submitted during the August 5th board hearing, as well as written comments received by the public comment due date. We may modify the permit based on the comments we receive. The State Water Board will consider the final draft permit for adoption in a future board meeting, which we anticipate will be in 2021. Now I would like to introduce Walter Mobley, who will be leading us through the mapping tool demonstration. Walter is a water resource control engineer in the Division of Water Quality. She is the contact person if you have any questions on how to use the mapping tool. If at any time during Walter's demonstration, you have a question about a feature on the mapping tool, please type in your question in the chat box. Diana will read your question for Walter to answer. Walter, take it away.
I think I will have to sub in for Walter. I believe she's working on her internet connection.
Oh, thank you, Dory. Dory Belen developed this mapping tool, and it seems like Walter has internet connection issues. So Dory will lead us through the demonstration. Thank you.
Perfect. And if Walter is watching, if for some reason you get your connection back, feel free to drop in and take over if you'd like to. Okay, I'll go ahead and start the process of sharing my screen. I need to get rid of this little guy. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to go over the mapping tool as Afruz introduced. Thank you, Afruz. My name is Dory Bellin. I work in the GAMMA program, which is also in the Division of Water Quality. I also do a lot of GIS work, so I was able to help out this unit in creating this tool. So I'll go over some of the basics, and then if there are specific questions that I might not have the expertise for, we also have a lot of great expertise here with other staff. When you first access the link for this mapping tool, you will come across a what's called a splash screen. This is that box that's in the middle of the screen. Its intention is to introduce you to what this mapping tool is and what you should be able to find here as far as information goes. It'll go through some basic instructions, and it'll also provide an email address for contacting anyone if you have any problems. And it'll also give a link to the suction dredge mining permit website. So there's a lot of great information here. You can just press OK and move right on to the mapping tool. When you come to this screen, you see the state of California. You see two shades. We have a pale yellow and like a green color. All of those lines and sections within the state of California are what we call HUC-10s. These are hydrological regions within the state. And this is what we use to define areas that would remain not allowed, or areas that would be allowed for suction dredge permit applications. On the top, you see a title. And to the right of that title, you see a little box where you can enter an address or water body. You can also enter in a Latin long in this box, and it'll give you active search results for whatever you're typing in at that time. And I'll go through an example of that in a second. You'll also see a plus and minus on the very left of your screen. This is for manually zooming in and out on the map. And you can also use the scroll button on your mouse if you have that. The layer list is in this big box, and that is what's showing as default when you first come to the mapping tool. You see a lot of lists of layers, and you'll see checkboxes turned on for the layers that will be in visible view for you when you're using the tool. So if you just want to stop looking at a certain layer, you just uncheck that box. If you want to see it again, you check it back on. There are several layers in here, and I'll go over what those layers are. We also have some extra features over here, which I will go into detail. You can change your base map, you can print, and you can look up more information. Now at any time, let's say that you're within the tool and you forgot what was on that splash screen, that makes this little widget a great reference. It goes over the information that was provided in that splash screen, and it also gives some more detailed information about the layers and information that you'll find in this tool. That can be closed anytime with just this little X. There are also some additional tools on the bottom that I will go over as well. So when you first get here, the intention is for the user to see these two areas, the pale yellow and the green. As I zoom in, all of a sudden we see counties appear and we'll see all the water bodies appear. The first intention of this tool is to allow the user to identify their water body to see if it's in one of those pale yellow or green areas. Now these are listed in the layer list with areas not allowed and areas allowed. So you can turn these off and on after you've determined what area you are in. Now, one of the first ways you can find your water body is just by zooming in. And as you zoom in, the clarity and the detail of the map will increase. Now we can also enter in the name of a water body. Let's say I wanted to enter in a lake, Folsom Lake. I can enter in stream names or I can enter in reservoirs and lakes here. As I do that, it's a live interaction with this box, and it's going to give me results as I type. And you also see that there are some categories here for the results. So we have lakes and reservoirs, and we also have this geocoding service. Geocoding is a way to locate an address. So if I were to put in my address here or the address of my land, I would be able to find then that area on the map. So here I'm looking for lakes. I'm going to go ahead and click on Folsom Lake. It's going to automatically highlight that lake that I've entered. I can zoom into this lake. This pop-up box is going to show me more information about anything that I'm working with in this map. Right now, it's telling me the information about this water body. Now, if I were to click on any area around, I just clicked on this little canal. It says Bongwind Canal. I can get information about this layer. Now, you can see it says 1 of 2. That means that there are 2 pop-up boxes that I could look through right here. And that is because where I clicked on this map, that point, whatever layers are turned on in this layer list, I have a pop-up for. So if I turn to the right, I can see the layer for areas not allowed has a pop-up box. And in this pop-up box, we have a lot of information. We have the HUC10 ID and name, where I just clicked. We can see all of the different criteria that were used to determine if an area was not allowed. And the information that will be listed next to all these criteria will tell you which of these criteria were positive or affirmed in this area that would make it a not allowed area. So we see that the water bodies all along or around and adjacent to Folsom Lake are in an area that's pale yellow, and I can confirm that by clicking on the map and seeing areas not allowed come up. I can also give you an example, excuse me, of an area that is allowed. If I were to just manually zoom, let's say I know that I'm in this area of Yolo County, I can zoom in and say, oh, okay, I think I'm right here on this water body, and I can click on it. This is the Yolo Central Canal. I see that it's a green area. I can click that arrow to also see the areas allowed pop-up box, because that is the layer that is active at that point that I clicked on the map. Now, as you see here, those same criteria are listed that determine if an area is allowed or not. And we can see that the values that are here next to those criteria are showing us that they're not affirmed, they're not positive in this area. So that's why this area is allowed. Now, to determine if an area is not allowed, any of the criteria that are defined in the legislation and in the draft permit document, any of those are present, then that area is not allowed. And we can go into details too. You can also see all those criteria if you expand the layer to the left in the layer list. Areas not allowed, if I click on that, it opens all these sub-layers. And these sub-layers are all the individual criteria that you also see in that pop-up box. So if I wanted to see the actual areas of, let's say, historic gold mining, I could turn that on, turn off the areas not allowed, and kind of see that area a little bit better. I can further investigate why that area is not allowed. Now, if I wanted to look at some other features of this mapping application, I could do so. If I turn off the lakes and streams, the water bodies in the state, I can turn on these first two layers, which are the lakes and reservoirs and the rivers and streams that are on the impaired water bodies list, the 303D list. And that's what these red features are that you're seeing on the map appear. And as you notice, as you look across the state, this is one of the criteria for determining if an area is allowed or not. So you see all of these red areas are going to be in areas that are pale yellow, areas not allowed. There's some great information here too, if you would like to interact with this. We see that, let's zoom in a little better here. We see that this water body is the Susan March wetlands. And we have a link here that we can follow. It gives the decision ID for the decision pollutant. The decision pollutant is also listed mercury. So this is what made it go on the impaired water bodies list. I can follow this list to a water board webpage that explains this decision and actually gives a map of this distinct water body and some more information about all the other decision pollutants that are impaired for this water body. The same exists for all of the streams and rivers as well that are in red. Another feature of the map is to look at the beneficial uses that exist for all the water bodies in the state of California. If I turn on that layer, I can see some light blue and some dark blue. Now, if I ever want to see the legend, the symbology for any of these layers, I can click on the titles of these in the layer list, and I can see then the symbology indicated for those. So here we can see that we have all of the water bodies highlighted. And if I zoom in to select one, you can see that since I have the areas not allowed layer on, the pop-up is going to appear for that. If I want to look for another pop-up for another layer that I have turned on, in this example, it's the beneficial uses layer. I just hit that right arrow and here comes the beneficial uses pop-up. This is identified as Pine Creek, and it explains in which regional board this basin plan is within. And it also explains that if I want to click on this beneficial uses table, I can investigate the beneficial uses for this water body and watershed. All of these beneficial uses are listed, and I could further click on one of them to get the actual definition and the uses that are supported by that beneficial use.
Dory, this is Diana. I have a question that just came in from Mr. Watson, and that is there a way to search on the data behind each lake and rivers? So I believe he's saying, is there a way to look at the data collectively, or if you can go ahead and answer this question, I'll repeat it again. Is there a way to search on the data behind each lake and rivers?
As far as the other features that would be included in that lake or river, or the features that were used, the criteria that were used to define whether it was an area not allowed or allowed, the way you can investigate the other values or features of a certain layer is to interact with that layer by, you can open the attribute table for every layer. And for every layer, it will list the actual table and all of the fields that you see in that pop-up. You can interact with this table as well. You can say, I would like to only see certain fields in here. I can filter for those, and I can show the related, this has a related table with it, the beneficial uses, but not all layers do, for example. But yes, you could sort by this. If you open the table for every layer, you can see the information behind that layer. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
I believe so.
Okay. If there's further questions, just let me know.
Yes.
Okay, so another feature that we have is to look at the additional information that may be applied to whether or not suction dredge mining permit applications or the actual mining activity will be allowed in a certain area. Now, this actual web application includes the Waterboards restrictions, the criteria that are outlined in our draft permit plan. If we were to look at CDFAs, they were nice enough and provided that layer for us. I'll go ahead and zoom out so we can kind of see what CDFA's layer looks like. There is one feature within our areas not allowed layer that has year-round restrictions within CDFA, and we've included that whether or not an area is allowed or not. But they do have additional seasonal restrictions. And these seasonal restrictions are listed in this layer that's named CDFA Additional Restrictions for Informational Use. Now, since we wouldn't be the agency that would permit for CDFA seasonal restrictions, we don't add them into our criteria, but we want to provide them here as an informational use for you. So if you were to click on the actual title of this layer, you would see the legend and what all these colors mean. Now, they have different seasonal restrictions depending on where that water body is and what time of year it is. So you can see they have different classes, Class A through Class H. Class H would be no color, open to dredging throughout the year. So there are no seasonal restrictions in those areas. But any other color, you would just look up and see, oh, okay, so my area would be in a CDFA additional seasonal restriction. So when I go to CDFA and go through their permitting process, there will be an additional seasonal restriction. We have done our best to reflect exactly what they've given us. Of course, this information can change, and if we know about it, we will update this application. But that would be part of the permit application process with CDFA.
Dory, this is Diana again. Can you just state what your acronym means? CDFA?
Oh, California Department of, it's not.
Are you talking, excuse me?
I'm sorry. I'm going blank right now. It's not,
Fruz, do you want to come in?
It's California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Fish and
So
Wildlife.
are we talking about CDFW?
Oh, is this acronym wrong?
You just said CD.
Are we talking, if you can please clarify somebody, which agency we're talking about? Are we talking about the California Department of Food and Ag? Or are we talking about the California Department of Fish and Wildlife?
We are talking about California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
So this acronym is incorrect. That's why I was confused about what I was supposed to say.
It should be CDFW.
Okay, I will go in there and I will change this. That's why you guys are the experts in this situation. So we will change that acronym. This should be CDFW. Thank you. So I mentioned that there were some other, we also have Senate districts and Assembly districts here as well for any legislative purposes that you would like to look at those regions. But I did mention that there are some other features in this application. As I mentioned, you can change the base map, and why you'd want to do this is maybe to see some of the colors in a different way, or if you want to actually look at the streets, if you knew your area better based upon the actual streets that are in your area, you could then turn on the streets base map, and you can kind of turn off some of the layers, and you can look at the actual streets in your area and find the water body that you're trying to locate that way. There are other base maps. Some of them will allow the colors of the layers to pop up a little bit more vividly if you have some colorblind issues or anything like that. We also have the imagery, the satellite imagery, so you can be able to see maybe where your house or your actual building is located in that picture. The other tool that we have is the print tool. And this print tool is really cool because it's going to print whatever you have currently in the map view. So if I wanted to get the area that I was interested in and actually document where those layers are allowed and not allowed, I could then create a PDF of my map. And if I click this advanced tab, I can go in and actually input some of the things I would like to see on my map. I can change the scale bar unit. I can change the print quality. I can also put my name on this map. So that's a really cool tool if you're interested. I mentioned the information widget. This is to give you some additional information that's also provided on the splash screen and a little bit more detail about what the criteria are for the areas allowed and not allowed. This little guy in the middle bottom, it says legend, and this is going to provide you with the symbology that you would see also by clicking on the layer title. But it's only going to give you that symbology for the layers that are turned on with this check mark. So if I were to turn on an additional layer, you would then see that symbology appear in the legend box. There we go. Also, we can close any of these widgets to kind of clean up our display, and we can see a little bit more of the map. This is the way to bring back that layer list if we wanted to, also that legend. We also have this coordinate converter. It's meant to actually put the Latin long going from decimal degree format. That's when you have a Latin long with the decimal and then the values after that decimal for your Latin long. You can convert that to the degrees, minutes, seconds format of your Latin long. But we can also use it to put a marker on our map. So I'm going to put in a random Latin long just to show you what this tool would do. I'm going to put a comma in between. Oops, what happened there? In between the Latin longitude. We have a negative value for our longitude because it is west. And when we press enter, it's going to put that marker on the map. You can move around these little widget boxes to help you locate where that marker went. And it's going to put that marker right there on the map. We can zoom in and we can see where it is located. I'm going to turn off some of these other layers. Once you interact with anything else, that is going to go away. But once I click right back on that box, it's going to come right back on the map. So then if I wanted to put in a Latin long to locate my water body that I was interested in, I could do so. Find that marker and then click right next to it to find the information about the areas that are allowed and not allowed in that area. Another tool that we have is a filter tool. The filter tool is very similar to the search tool, but a filter will actually remove all the other water bodies, for instance, if I'm putting in a water body name that don't meet that filter. When I went to a search, all the other water bodies were still on the map. It located Folsom Lake, but I could still see all the other water bodies. If I put Folsom Lake in here, it's only going to show Folsom Lake on the map. It's also going to zoom into it. Anything that meets this filter, let's say there were 2 Folsom Lakes in the state, for instance, it would show both of them. So I've pressed enter to activate the filter. And I'm going to make sure that our lakes and streams are turned on so I can see the actual feature that I've asked to see. And it has panned into the area of Folsom Lake. And I'm also able to interact with it, of course, by clicking on it and identifying that as Folsom Lake. I can turn off and on this widget tool as well, and it would turn off and on that filter. The minute I turn it off, it's going to pan right back out, but it's still going to keep my pop-up up so I can see the information about that water body. Are there any additional questions?
Not yet. I don't see any coming in yet. I'll let you know.
Sure. But a mapping tool is meant to have the user play around with it. You know, feel free. You're not going to break anything. Zoom in and out. Play with the layers by turning them off and on. You can also, for more advanced users, there is a way to, in this little dot menu to the right of every layer name, you have a lot of options. You can play with the transparency. The transparency is going to make it more opaque or less opaque, so you can see the information behind the map. Let's say you want to look at the streets behind the layer. You could do that if you had that base map turned on. You could also turn off the pop-ups if, let's say, the clicking on your touchpad of your laptop was really sensitive and you were tired of the pop-ups. You could do that for that layer. You could open the attribute table, which is the information behind the layer, as I mentioned and showed you before. You can also go to show item details. And for those advanced users, this is going to bring you to our GIS portal. It's going to allow you to read the metadata about every layer, and it'll also let you download or connect directly to that information. I'm also listed as a resource on the metadata of these. So you can contact me at any time. You can email me and I can help answer questions about the GIS part of the data.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dory. Walter, were you able to connect?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My apologies.
Walter.
My internet has been down
Walter, will you please go through your initial slides on how to actually get onto this map? Renan did share with everyone what the link is, but I believe just having that visual would be very helpful.
Sure. Hello, everyone. And again, my name is Walter Mobley, and I will be the point of contact for any questions that you have regarding the map. I'm going to share my screen and show you guys where you can find this on the Suction Dredge mining webpage. Give me one brief moment. It says I'm host disabled participant screen sharing. I don't know if I'm a guest or a co-host.
And once you get on, I do see some other questions regarding the map.
We do have the website pulled up if that's helpful.
Okay. Give me. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So the Suction Dredge Mining webpage is the waterboards.ca.gov/water_issues/NPDES/suction_dredge_mining.html. And that will take you to the Suction Dredge Mining webpage. If you were to scroll down under announcements, there's a few bullets. The fourth bullet will get you directly to the draft interactive mapping application when you click on it. Another great tool that you can utilize is the fifth bullet, which is the mapping application user guide. It goes over, I came in when I saw Dory's Folsom Lake example. That example is used in the user guide.
We're losing Walter. So Afruz or Dory, can you take over? Unfortunately, I think the weather is affecting her internet.
Dory, would you please, since the map is on, take over?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, go all the way to the user guide, and then we have some questions on the maps. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. She was just going over about how Folsom Lake was the example in my demonstration, but it's also the example in this user guide. And there's a lot, all the links to the user guide are all the links to the mapping tool provided within this user guide, as well as information about how to ask additional questions of staff. But this user guide goes through all of the different features of this web mapping application. So you can then see what we talked about today in the demonstration, you could see in these examples in the user guide.
Wonderful. Thank you. And after you pan through that, if you can go back onto the map.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some questions coming in, but we have a follow-up from Mr. Watson, and then we'll go on to the question from Ms. Martin. All right. So Mr. Watson had previously asked the question, Renan, we may need you on this. The previous question was, is there a way to search on the data behind each lake and river? And then the follow-up is, for example, if it was identified to be positive in mercury, is there a research paper, report, some sort of data that showed that results? Between Dory and Ron, please answer that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
to elaborate, I think they're asking whether they can see the data that was utilized to make the justification of why a water body is impaired or not. So is there any mercury data or any of the metals data available through the map? And I know we can get to the decision ID But I think that will also take you to the data. And Dory, you can follow up on that and see if that's exactly accurate or not.
We can definitely play with it right now.
Okay.
But isn't your data available with CDN too?
True.
Yes, okay, so we have that option as well. I've clicked on that link that was in the pop-up after turning on the the impaired water bodies layers in the mapping tool. It brought me to the water body that I specifically clicked on in the mapping tool, and it lists all of the pollutants that are on the impaired water bodies list for this water body. We can see mercury here is listed with that decision ID of 38628. That is also a link, which then brings you into the actual fact sheet of that decision ID. And it allows you to read all of the information about mercury and this water body and what the conclusion was of the regional board for this recommendation to be placed on the impaired water body list. Looks like it goes into where it was found, what the kind of sample it was, and then it has the reference for the data. It has a link to, looks like 2 links. Maybe one goes to a paper, unpublished data, okay, from 2004, and then mercury bioaccumulation and trophic transfer in the Cache Creek watershed. So let's see where these, can't tell if this, okay, so it did open additional, no, it didn't.
Okay, so that is for if a water body is impaired. Renan, can you go over the other basis for that is included in our draft permit for if a water body is identified as positive for mercury, if it's not impaired, the other factors, please?
Right. There's the other one where there's fish tissue data available. So we have impairment and we also had detections of fish tissue data. So I think that's the second criteria. And that's specifically just for mercury.
Yes.
Okay.
So detection, whether it was it had a mercury detection.
So would that fish tissue data be accessible? Can we look at a river to see that's based on fish tissue alone and see if we, because that data comes from CDN. So
Right, which is our public database for the quality of our surface waters. Okay, so Renan, so we're stating so far that the map, if it shows positive for mercury, it could be either impaired for mercury, it can be either we had detected detections in fish tissue. Are there other criteria or parameters that we use to mark a water body positive for mercury?
no, those will be the only 2 currently being used and actually being used in the permit as well as in this map.
In the draft permit. Okay, very good. And Mr. Watson said thank you. All right. So we have our next question from Izzy Martin, and that is focused in the Yolo County. She states, in the Yolo County example, the map showed that suction dredge mining would be allowed in a canal. Has the water district responsible for that canal been notified about this status?
I think we can basically remind everybody that this is a draft permit and there's still an application process. So if a miner or a suction dredge miner submits an application and it happens to be on that canal, currently the canal does not have any of the criteria applicable for us to prohibit it. So that's why that water or that canal in that watershed is allowed. But when they do submit an application, we will then have more of a open discussion to see if that's even considered appropriate for the district or even notify the district during the application process.
Okay.
So I think we're prematurely pointing that out. We still have a process later on. Plus there's still comments. And so everybody's being aware of this permit. So granted, if there's a district in those areas, most likely they'll be concerned if there is an allowance for this type of permit.
All
But
right.
again,
very-
you may never get an application, so it may never go anywhere.
Yes, and that's a very good comment, Izzy, on it's making us think how we would maybe have to reach out. I do want to follow up on if there is a canal, the canal may or may not be a water of the United States or water of the state. Regardless, our state water board permits, right now it's draft, but is, if adopted, as currently proposed, and that canal does show, this permit cannot supersede any more restrictive local ordinances, or maybe I might say any local ordinances that conflict. All right. And please chat back if we're not getting to the heart of your question. All right, so there's another question here from Ellen Weir. Does this map include any information about the protected status of land and waters? For example, I see that Mono Lake Tufa State National Reserve is allowed. And Renan, I believe that's touching on the comments that we had at our first workshop.
Right. On our first workshop, it was pointed out that some of the allowed watersheds do not include other possible prohibitions under other agencies and other acts and regulations. So there are some wilderness areas that currently this map does not include, but we could make this map a multi-agency tool where we could incorporate other regulations and other prohibitions. But at this point, this map is only related to the draft permit. Based on the comments, we could incorporate and make it more a multi-agency tool. And so that would also include this type of natural reserves now being allowed in the future, at least from using this tool.
Mm-hmm. Right, and this is Diana again. The reason we can do that is because this mapping tool is not proposed to be part of the water board's permits. And so if adopted, our state water board statewide permit is regulation for suction dredge mining activity in accordance with the California Water Code and the Clean Water Act, and any other jurisdiction in which the state water board has to act within. The state water board does not have the authority to act for other agencies' prohibitions and so forth. However, this map is guidance. It's a tool. It is not part of that permit. So as staff, we are exploring using this map and actually pulling in other agency information, because we do not want to lead any minors or any other interested parties down the routes that they can apply both through the water boards and through the Department of Fish and Wildlife for a permit in an area that our map shows as green, as proposed to be allowed, and ultimately, if adopted, allowed. Yet there is another agency that would prohibit that miner from mining. So, so we are reaching out to other agencies. If the folks in the audience here know of other agencies and contacts that we should reach out to, if you'll please provide that in the chat or email it to us, we are happy to follow up. In fact, that is one thing on our to-do list, is to follow up with other agencies. All right. So I have another question here from Mr. Watson. Can we use an example of gold-bearing stream and how to search on it? So we have the map up. Let's pull up a river. Okay, so I'm trying to think of a river gold bearing. And so let's think of one in the foothills. All right, someone from Region 5, help me out. Let's say one around Grass Valley. So we have lots of our rivers and creeks around Grass Valley that are gold-bearing streams, since there are lots of historic gold mines up there. So Dory and Renan, can you just go through an example of picking one of those rivers?
Sure, currently on the
And can you go through a couple examples on how to search for any of those rivers? Thank you.
Sure. If you were watching the mapping tool as I was locating this one, I would just use the zooming interactive abilities within the mapping tool with my mouse, dragging the map, and also zooming in and out with my mouse to locate the area in which I wanted to first start looking. I did click on Wolf Creek. We also have, what is this, the Deer Creek. We also have Greenhorn Creek. We could also look for them in this search box. So if I wanted to put in Greenhorn Creek up here, it's going to start bringing back the results of what I'm typing. And I can click on it and it's going to then highlight it on the map for me. If you did notice, so I could see the base map behind these layers, I did turn the opacity down. So I'm able to interact with that base map behind the layers a little easier if I adjust this transparency. So feel free to do that. That's the uniqueness of this mapping tool to make it fit for your use. We click on that Greenhorn Creek, press that right arrow and go to areas not allowed pop-up. And then we could see for which criteria were positive for this area to make it not allowed. So in this example, we have that they are not on the impaired water bodies list, but there was a mercury detection above the standard. There was some historic gold mining. It is allowed for CDFW, and let's see, and regional board is one of the criteria as well, but that's obviously not here. So yeah, you can investigate and look at the different criteria involved to determine if it was an area not allowed. You could find it with the search tool. You could also use that filter tool that I showed you as well.
Wonderful. I hope that answered the question. If not, please follow up in the chat. We did have a question on, go ahead, Renan.
Also, I just wanted to add, it will help if we make the layer that shows all the historical mining locations. That way we can then look at a river that's within those proximity of those locations. And then they will understand why those rivers are currently not allowed, if that's what they were getting at, which I think it is.
Why don't you walk through that example?
Okay, so I have turned on for under areas not allowed. We have those sub layers I mentioned. We have historic gold mining location, and we also have HUC10 : historic gold mining. Now we wanted to, as I mentioned before, we use HUC10s to define whether an area is allowed or not. Now, if there's point data involved, like a mercury hit above standard or historic gold mining location, those are point data, obviously, but the HUC10, the whole HUC10 is then selected for defining areas allowed or not allowed for wherever that point lies. So we wanted to also provide that point data for the historic gold mining locations that we have in our database. So as you can see here, you have all of the points for historic gold mining that we know of, and then defined that HUC10 around those points that they are within, so you can see it from both perspectives. We could then locate, let me zoom way in here, and we can see some historic gold mining. Now, there should be a pop-up for the historic gold mining actual location. So if I go through, yeah, historic gold mining location, this is Bloomer Hill. It gives the name of the site and the Latin long in which county it was within. And then it will have another one for the actual HUC10. It'll name and ID that HUC10 that is within. And then you could also, if I wanted to turn on the areas not allowed, I would then be able to click on the map and see a pop-up for that one as well, and see that it is indeed historic gold mining, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Renan, did you want to add anything further?
No, that's good.
Okay, all right. So we jumped into questions right away since our staff presentation went pretty quickly. We had an answer if the audience is going to have the ability to ask questions after break. Absolutely. We will continue answering questions for as long as there are questions. I see a question here from Shannon Poe, but that might take a little longer than just 5 minutes before we break for 10 minutes. Fruz, did you want to break now or do you want us to take more questions before?
Yes, Diana, I think we should take a short break now, and then after the break, we can unmute commenters if they prefer to ask their questions, and we can have a question and comment session then.
Okay, very good. So how long do we have on break, and can folks still submit questions and comments during the break?
They can submit their questions on the Zoom chat box. We can take a 10-minute break. But couple of reminders, you can go ahead and submit your question during the break, and please use the Zoom chat box and indicate whether you would like to ask your question yourself or if you like staff to read it. And please make sure that you have your full name up. If you have any technical issues with Zoom, please submit your an email to Suction Dredge Mining, NPDES, at waterboards.ca.gov. We will troubleshoot and make sure that you can enter the Zoom and ask your questions. We can go on our break now, and please be back at 10:05.
Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope you got a chance to stretch and get a drink. We will now begin our question and comment session. You are welcome to continue sending us your questions through chat, and we will try our best to answer as many questions as we can. As a reminder, instructions for submitting questions or for technical problems are on this slide, and we will keep the slide during the questions and comment session, except when we want to share the mapping tool for people who have questions on that.
Okay, great. It's great. It just clicked 10:06, so let's get going. All right. So this next question is from Shannon Pope. What was the criteria or what was the scientific basis you used to prohibit suction dredge mining on the vast majority of streams and rivers which have not had any scientific studies performed to show the presence of mercury? So in answering that question, let's pull up a watershed. Let's zoom into one of the watersheds in which the water bodies are impaired for mercury, or let's just say are prohibited as we're proposing for mercury. And Renan, if you can work with Dory on this, maybe identify a water body in which is not impaired, but we're still proposing prohibition, and explain what the criteria is. And then we can go into explaining also the scientific basis behind our data.
While Dory's going around, let me kind of remind everybody. We basically have 5 criteria in the draft permit as to why we're prohibiting suction dredge mining in certain watersheds. We have 1 related to the impaired water bodies for mercury and metals. We have another one for where detection of fish tissue in mercury shows above the objective. Then we have the California Department of Fish and Wildlife all-year regulations, prohibitions. So that's not necessarily based on a study. The first 2 are based on data. This third one is based on regulations from CDFW. Then we have the 4th one, which is also based on studies, which has to do with any historical mining. We have identified those locations and we have identified water bodies related to those locations. So that's another prohibition. And the 5th one has to do with Region 1, all watershed prohibition under their basin plan. So it's a basin plan prohibition that the entire basin plan is prohibited from suction dredge mining. So now—
And Region 1 is the North Coast,
North Coast
Regional Water Quality Control Board region. Okay.
So, and then now let's go back. There are identified water bodies because of impairment and because of fish tissue data, but we've expanded that to a watershed because under a watershed and the Hot 10 watershed, because any tributary to that impaired water, we feel like will impact it. So that's why we've expanded it to a watershed basis as opposed to just the rivers themselves. And so the same thing we've done with every single criteria, we've expanded to a watershed basis. So that's more or less our reason or rationale as to why the prohibitions are identified on a watershed basis. And the ones that are based on studies, again, anything impaired water bodies is already, we have the data. That's why those are prohibited. The fish tissue, mercury, we're relating that to studies that have demonstrated that the activity transfers that methylated mercury. Therefore, any bioaccumulation, any detection in the fish tissue would only, the activity would only incorporate or add more to it. So that's the rationale. And the gold mining, historic gold mining, has to do with also another study that identified that where there has been historic gold mining, there has also been high levels of mercury. So that study gave us the basis to prohibit it based on historic gold mining.
So I have 2 follow-up questions for you, Renan, and also for Paul Levy. The first one's just for you, Renan. The second is to give Paul a heads up to help out with the response if necessary. So Renan, for folks that are not familiar with what HUC 10 means in regards to a watershed, can you expand on that, please?
Sure. It's basically USGS develops different sizes of water bodies or regions. So watershed is defined as hydrological unit code 10, and that's the definition for a watershed. So basically, any water bodies run into the same. Eventually, they all run into the same stream. Yeah, and that's how a watershed is identified. So and is the HOG 10 level. There's even larger levels and lower levels, but the HOG 10 identify a standard watershed. I'm sorry, I have a couple of.
I hear a dog wants to add
Yeah.
in. If someone wants to show us a video of your cute dog, let us know. Otherwise, if you can please mute.
Right.
Okay, just if you can repeat that last part before you continue.
So again, a HOG 10 is defined as the right level for a watershed.
All right.
USGS time, USGS stream.
Okay, very good. My second question is, will you please expand on the data that you and Paul used when developing the preliminary map, including which data from which integrated report and what the integrated report is?
The integrated report is basically a accumulation of data that goes through the EPA, goes through the Waterboards, and goes through EPA for adoption as to what data was used to determine why a water body is impaired. So it's basically the summary of the data that was used to identify different water bodies and the rationale for impairing because of the data showing above the objective.
Okay.
So it's a summary of the data that demonstrated that the water body indeed does not meet the standard for protection of the beneficial uses existing in that water body.
Okay, and this is the data that our state water board, as well as other entities, collects for planning purposes and for 303D list purposes?
And exactly, and it goes through the water board process for adoption, and then it also gets approved and adopted by EPA.
Okay, very good. And what do you know what kind of quality control it goes through? It
goes through all QA/QC, right? Anything that does not pass this QA/QC will not be used in that data and analysis of the data.
Okay, very good. And then also, if someone wants to see the list of the scientific studies that we used, is that right now in the draft permit fact sheet, or are we intending on including it or placing it somewhere else for folks to access?
The draft permit references the studies themselves but we can certainly share the location. I think they're publicly accessible, but we can certainly share the location. In fact, a lot of the miners have already access to that data, and they're the ones that in fact submitted all this information as well. So we're using studies that are well known. There's nothing new.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Shannon, if you'll let us know if we answered your question. Also, if maybe you want to speak on that also, we can let you into the Zoom meeting to speak. But otherwise, let us know if we answered your question through the chat, please. All right. We have a comment from Ellen Weir, and that is that we'll submit comments later, but recommend contacting the California Department of Parks and Recreation, Mono Lake, for example, and federal land agencies, for example, Forest Service and National Park Services and BLM. And so I believe she's probably providing us that feedback when it comes to our discussion of pulling in other agency information and contacts. So thank you, Ellen. All right. Our next question is from Robert. I might mess up your last name, sorry. Guardiola? Yeah, Robert Guardiola. Okay. Are you allowing any exit from prohibition if it can be proven pollutants would not be an issue? Renan, I can either answer that, but you could probably answer it first. And if I have further to add, I will.
Can you repeat it? I didn't quite understand it.
Sure. Are we allowing any exit from prohibition? So that means, are we allowing any allowance where there may be a prohibition? If it can be proven pollutants would not be an issue.
Again, I guess the answer, the simple answer will be, I believe so, because keep in mind, this is a statewide permit. So this is the best approach that we can set these regulations on a statewide basis. This does not mean that a miner can actually go to a regional board and apply for a site-specific permit that will be based on site-specific information that would demonstrate that possibly a prohibited area under a statewide permit may be actually considered allowed. But again, it would be based on site-specific data to demonstrate that what we're saying on a statewide permit is actually not applicable at their specific location.
Okay, so that was a simple answer from Renan, and I'm going to give the more complicated answer to build on what Renan stated. So if this NPDES permit is a little tricky to understand on a regulatory basis, but here's the foundation, and we have our attorney, Ryan Mallory Jones, to add in some if I don't get all the detail in as thorough as necessary. But basically, we're starting with the statewide moratorium on suction dredge mining, where suction dredge mining is prohibited in California. And with this permit, us as State Water Board staff, and then when adopted, the State Water Board is identifying what areas that prohibition would be lifted based on data and information that the State Water Board has to allow mining in those areas. So it's somewhat like Swiss cheese, that you have a whole layer of cheese over the state, and the State Water Board's coming in and punching holes in and identifying areas that mining is going to be allowed. Areas where mining is not going to be allowed basically continues the statewide prohibition. Now, so you're asking if there is a way you can exit from a prohibition, kind of like an off-ramp based on any other data. For the State Water Board permit, we are proposing the statewide permit to be for the scope of in-water mining only. So that's mining that takes place within the banks of a water of the United States. If you have data to somewhat reverse what we're proposing, if we're proposing an area to be prohibited, but you believe you have data, you need to get that in during this permit development process for staff and for our board to consider. Because once our board adopts a permit, unless the board puts in any off-ramp, there is no off-ramp. And for an NPDES permit, for a requirement in a permit to be reversed, a board would have to go back in and amend that permit. I do not believe that is within the delegation of an executive director or a delegee. But regardless, that process would have to be embedded in the permit that the State Water Board adopts. Now, when it comes to being able to go to a regional water board for a specific permit, if the State Water Board permit is prohibiting suction dredge mining within the water, so within the banks of a water of the US, that basically would hold. I'm not an attorney. I do not believe, though, a regional board can make a less stringent allowance.
I'll jump in, Diana.
This is Ryan Mallory Jones of our Office of Chief Counsel. Thank you, Ryan, for coming in and giving more specifics.
Sorry, yeah. Diana, I think there's two things you raised. The first is about creating some sort of exemption process within the permit itself. And you're right. Right now, the proposed permit does not have a process for submitting, for example, site-specific information and getting an exemption or, a pathway to coverage in an area that's identified as not allowed. But as far as going to the regional boards, say this permit is adopted with the, as the map shows it right now, a party would be able to apply to a regional board, as Renan was saying, with some site-specific information. I saw a question pop up about whether that would be WDRs. It would depend on the water body, whether it's a water of the United States or a water of the state. I think I'm not I don't work for the regional boards, but I think what would have to be done there generally is you'd have to overcome, you'd have to show that the concerns identified in this permit may not apply and that permitting may be appropriate. So essentially they'd have to meet the same bar. You'd have to show that the concerns identified in the statute that placed the moratorium and the concerns we identified in this permit may not apply, and that a permit would be appropriate, but a regional board would be able to approve a permit with more site-specific. Because what, as you said, what this is doing is the status quo in the state is that there's a moratorium in place. And what this permit is really doing is lifting that moratorium in specific areas for specific activities. The regional boards would be able to continue lifting that moratorium in specific areas for specific activities if the concerns of SB 637, the bill that prohibited suction dredge mining, were addressed, as well as any other water quality concerns within their, within their purview. So which is generally the same as ours. So.
I see. Wonderful. So let's, so actually, thank you for popping on, and I was corrected on that. So let's clarify then for this question. If this order is adopted by the state water board showing in water area that, showing a water body that the state water board through this order would be prohibiting in water mining, then a miner could go to a regional board and provide further data to actually potentially be allowed to mine in that same water body?
Yes, under a regional board specific permit. I think the hurdle with again, and I can't really speak for the regional boards, but what I think the hurdle would primarily be would be showing that the reasons that we do not lift the prohibition in this permit, that we're saying it's continuing to not be allowed, may not apply to a site specific, or conversely, that maybe the concerns exist, but that site specific best management practices could be used to, or that and it could be used to mitigate those impacts, or throwing out another possible scenario that the form of mining itself is different, and that they're not doing, maybe the applicant is not doing the in-water mining as defined in this permit. So the activity itself isn't covered by this permit. So they're applying for a site-specific regional board permit for that activity.
Okay, very good. So it sounds like there is, I won't call it an exit, but there is a potential follow-up process through a regional water board to further investigate if they could mine in an area if the statewide permit prohibits it.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. It's not an exit. It's just a different permit with different conditions. And because this is a statewide permit, as Renan said, and I think you hit on as well, the effort is trying to craft something that's appropriate for statewide usage, general enrollment. A regional board permit could dial down on site-specific information more, on site-specific activities more, and on specific BMPs or practices that might be used.
Okay,
to mitigate
very
those impacts. Yeah.
Wonderful. And then also for clarification, the follow-up, would that be through a waste discharge requirement? Ryan, can you follow through on what type of order would be needed if it's in water and what type of order would be needed outside of water?
I think there's, it would just depend on the site specific, the nature of the application. It could be an NPDES permit like this one is if it's a discharge to a water of the US. It could be a WDR if it's a water of the state. There might be some circumstances in which something that falls under the definite, under that moratorium that the legislature passed, that might be appropriate for an Army Corps permit and a Clean Water Act Section 401 certification. I can't say specifically. It just depends on what the regional board determines is appropriate for the site and whether or not they're able to go forward with permitting.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And we have a follow-up question on what would be the process for supplementing that data. And that process would be dependent on what the Regional Water Quality Control Board would be requiring when it comes to information. And if we have anyone here in the audience from a regional water board and you'd like to add a little bit more input, go ahead and put it in the chat and we're happy to either share it or we will allow you to speak. All right, so Robert says thank you. Okay, so we have another question or a statement from Shannon Poe. Renan states he feels, based on historic information, that if someone mined an area in the 1800s per the Huck 10 watershed, tributaries must be prohibited. But this is not science or fact. It is based on feelings and an admitted assumption. To render 95% of the mining claims fallow based on an assumption is not science. Are there any studies planned for waterways which are not 303D listed for mercury levels? For example, ones which are currently prohibited based on these assumptions? All right, so part of that, Shannon, is comments, and we thank you for your comments, and we want to make sure you submit any further comments in writing, because that's the way we get that, the written comments so that we can further consider. But as we have this comment here, Renan, do you want to answer this, or do you want me to follow through?
No, certainly I can elaborate on that. Just to clarify, there is a study that identified a relationship between historic gold mining and the presence of mercury, basically the release of mercury into those water bodies near that historic gold mining. So based on that study, based on the information provided by that study, it's being proposed that the same impacts will be observed in water bodies close to other historic gold mines. So we're proposing that based on that original study that the same conditions would apply to the other areas. Therefore, the prohibition applies or is proposed for any historic gold mining will have the same effects on receiving waters located within those water areas. So
okay.
I wouldn't say it's a feel. I don't know if I say, maybe I used the wrong term, but I don't recall saying feel. But I'm just, again, stating that it was a study that identified a correlation. And based on that study, again, it's a statewide permit, we're again identifying on or creating the same approach for all those historic gold mining areas.
Okay, very good. And what is the study, and is it referenced in the fact sheet?
The study's in the permit, and I can read it again just so everybody knows. It's a study. Let's see. Title: Mercury Contamination from Hydraulic Placer Gold Mining in the Dutch Flat Mining District, California. It's a 1999 United States Geological Survey Water Resources Investigations Report. And you can actually see the summary in the pages 179 through 189. So basically the study found extremely high mercury concentrations in the water and sediment demonstrating a positive correlation between mercury bioaccumulation and the intensity of historic hydraulic gold mining in the Sierra Nevada.
Okay, very
And
good.
it's in the fact sheet, page F13 of the draft permit.
Okay, good. So I see comments coming in, which is wonderful. And I want to just be careful that we respect the scope of what we publicly noticed this workshop on, which was for demonstration of the maps. That does not mean we're going to shut down this conversation. I just want to state that we need to be careful because we don't want to go into a full-fledged comments and answers when it comes to the draft order. However, you're commenting on some items, which I will read out loud. And I do want to state, please make sure you get these comments into your written comments during the current public comment period, which ends on March 8th. So comments that just came in on what Renan just said. One is that is not a proper assumption. So in your written comments, if you want to follow through on that, please provide your rationale and your basis on that comment. And as staff, we really do need, when you do have a comment, an explanation behind the comment so we can thoroughly consider it. And the second comment is that that study is for hydraulic mining. And the next comment is that placer mining and hydraulic mining are quite different. Okay. And we have, can you please publicly state when the next public comments are due? Sure. So when we went to, so last year we issued the draft permit back in May of 2020. And then we went forward with the permit development process. And I'm going to let Afrouz go forward and explain the details of that process in which we're currently still in.
So we held a State Waterboard board hearing on August 5th to allow interested parties provide oral comments in front of the board members. And during that public hearing, a lot of commenters expressed frustration with the maps that we had included in the draft permit, which were basically PDFs. And the board members directed staff to postpone the public comment period indefinitely until we have some higher resolution maps that are more user-friendly. So that's what happened. In the fall, our staff, Dory Bellin, developed this great mapping tool, and we announced the State Water Board had another updated public notice that announced the new public comment due date of March 8th. So as soon as you submit your written comments by noon on March 8th, those will be considered, and also any oral comments that you provided during the board hearing on August 5th.
Yes, and typically in our statewide permit development process, after a public comment period ends, as staff, we go through all the public comments and we consider all the public comments and we make recommended responses to those comments. And that is when, if there's any of those comments that we as staff accept, we modify our proposed permits accordingly. Then the proposed permits will be considered by our State Water Board at a public State Water Board adoption meeting. And during that adoption meeting, our board typically also holds open comments, an open period in which interested parties can verbally provide more comments at that meeting. So We do provide our response to comments in writing with the final draft permit, and that is all prepared at least 10 days before the adoption meeting. Most of the time with these larger statewide permits, we like to get our final proposed draft out earlier so that there is more than just the minimum 10 days to see the permit. In fact, I believe there may even be a 30-day threshold before the adoption meeting. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see.
I also have a
Yes.
couple of slides towards the end that I will go over the next steps.
Okay, good, good. All right. So I see some comments here, and I'd like to ask Renan if you can elaborate a little bit. Back to that study on mining and historic gold mines. So we have the comments that placer mining and hydraulic mining are different. Renan, can you expand a little further on how we connected the dots between what that study is stating and how we concluded that that water body may have levels of mercury and other mining associated pollutants?
Right. It's being interpreted that obviously everybody knows that mercury was being used in those back in the day where most of historic gold mining was developed. So the fact that they used mercury and there was no concerns of how to dispose of that mercury or what to do. So the studies that I referenced in the permit clearly indicated that mercury was actually being impacted or impacting water bodies within those gold mining, historic gold mines. So the fact that mercury was present and is related to the use of mercury for mining gold, that's the correlation. Mercury was used, mercury was discharged, or mercury runoff into the rivers near those gold mines. And that's why the historic gold mines are the ones that are more related to not current ones, because probably current ones are managing the use of mercury or maybe using different techniques. So it goes back to just historic gold mines, why those will have more relatable impacts with regards to mercury. And that's the connection.
Okay, very good. All right. Thank you for that. I am not seeing any other questions. I do see some comments. Thank you that you like our presentation. Oh, there's one more. There is another question, and keep the questions coming, please. Okay, one is on the, okay, I'm going to jump to Shannon posed question since it's still on the same thing. Are the historic gold mining areas hydraulic mines or where there was just activity?
Maybe I'm hoping Paul could actually add to that, because I'm trying to remember, we looked at the U.S. Bureau of Mining, and maybe Paul has more details on that if he's able to.
Are you saying Paul or Poe?
Paul.
Paul, okay.
Yes, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, and this is Paul Levy, one of our staff in our Division of Water Quality that assisted us with our maps and our data. So the question is, are the historic gold mining areas hydraulic mines or where there was just activity?
Historic mines was interpreted very broadly. The database that we used, some mines have a lot of information about them and some had very little. So basically any past mining operation of any type could be included in the historic mines.
Okay, so the dots on the map that represent historic mines could also mean that there was documented gold mining activity there. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, Shannon, I hope that answers your question. We do have a comment on the presentation that the GIS map is nicely done and easy to use. Unfortunately, the baseline data is not complete yet. Therefore, I'm not sure if it is useful. Thank you for that comment, and thanks for providing your reasoning behind the baseline data. All right, so I am not seeing any new questions or comments. You could probably see me looking down on my screen. Did I miss anyone's questions, or are there any further questions or comments? Please let us know through the chat. All right, Fruz, I think what we'll do now is possibly have you go through your slides, and that'll give a little extra time if folks do think of something more they want to share.
Sure.
And if not, we'll go ahead and close early.
Okay. Thank you all so much for your questions and feedback. Your participation in this process is so important to us, so we appreciate you taking time to join us today. I will now go over the next steps for the draft suction dredge mining NPDES permit. As we mentioned earlier, the end of the public comment period is noon on March 8th of this year. Please make sure that you submit your written comments. Instructions are provided on the public notice on how to submit your comments. After we receive all your comments, we will review every single comment and provide written responses. After that, the State Water Board will consider the adoption of the draft permit in a future board meeting. We will anticipate that will happen sometime in 2021. Is there any questions coming in, Diana, or should I close the meeting?
Oh, no, don't close yet. Someone just asked how many people are participating in this meeting. So as I look on my screen, there's 22. However, there's quite a bit of staff. There's about 7 or 8 of us State Water Board staff. And there are a couple of Central Valley Regional Water Board staff. And so I would probably say there's about 13 interested parties that are outside of the water board agency.
And we have people watching the webcast.
Oh yes, that's right. We have people watching the webcast. Do we know how many folks are watching the webcast? Do we have record of that? Maybe Gerg, if you want to answer that. Gergagen?
Hi, this is Gergagen. Currently, we have no information on how many people are viewing it. I assume potentially that's information we can get later on, if available at all.
All right, and Fruz, can you repeat also again, like you did earlier in the presentation, about the availability of the presentations and audio?
Yes, we will post the recording of this workshop as well as these PowerPoint presentations on our website, on our NPDES program webpage, which is, we can provide a link to the website on the chat. Renan, if you can type in that, that will be great.
Okay, and Ger, how long does it typically take to get the audio recording and to post it?
It would depend. We would just need to contact our AV services to see when we can get that recording. I expect it to be a short turnaround time though.
Okay, I would probably estimate 2 weeks. And if someone is needing the audio recording sooner, you can contact us and we can see what we can do. All right, so I see folks saying thank you to us. You're very welcome. This is our job as staff to make sure that we reach out and we share with you our professional viewpoint and knowledge on the draft permit. I do want to say that we welcome all comments. We do not take anything personally. We're used to doing this work. And what's most important is that if there are any disagreements or objectives, that those are voiced from different interested parties during this permit development phase. Because not only the State Water Board needs that information to consider as they adopt it, but once an NPDES permit is adopted, as staff, when we implement the permit, we must implement the permit as written in the adopted order. So this is a very important stage in the development process if there's disagreements. I also like to always stress to interested parties, if there's areas in the proposed order that you like and you support, it's just as important to comment on that, because there's always parties that may not like that portion of the order, and it's very helpful for us staff to see different viewpoints. All right, so I think that's it, Afrouz. I don't see any more questions or input.
Okay. Thank you for your participation. We really appreciate all of your questions and comments. And if you're aware of other interested parties that have not subscribed to our statewide email system, please pass this information to them, as we will be providing updates through our Lyras email system. You can find all of this information on our program webpage. Thank you.
Afrouz, do we have a link to the program webpage? Oh, there goes Renan. He just, I think, shared the link to the program webpage. Wonderful. Okay. Can you leave the meeting on so that folks can just take a snapshot of that link? Okay. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.